Hello again, and welcome back to Finding Sanctuary. This is a series of discussions between Buddhist renunciate women about the Therigatha. These are poems composed by fully enlightened nuns at the Buddha's time. I'm Ayya Vimalanyani, and with me today is Anagarika Sabbamitta again. Hello, Anagarika Sabbamitta. So nice to see you again.
Yes, hello. Nice to see you again too.
So I heard that you are doing a project to translate a large amount of Pali suttas into German, including also the Therīgāthā verses. Mm-hmm. So that sounds very interesting. And I thought maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your project and what inspired you to do that.
Oh, yes. I have started this project in mid-2019. And the scope of the project is the four Nikayas, the four main Nikayas, and the early parts of the Khuddaka Nikaya, to which the Therīgāthā collection belongs. We do already have German translations of large parts of that canon, and the reason why there should be new ones, well, there are various reasons. The translations that we have are already somewhat older, or many of them anyway, and the language is a little bit outdated. And also in recent years, research has brought new findings about relations between the Pali Canon and other transmission traditions of the Buddhist texts. So there is just a lot of new knowledge available that these early translators did not have. So these are all reasons for new translations to be done. And when Bhante Sujato's new English translations came out, I liked them very much because of their fresh language and easily accessible language, which is a little bit different in the existing German translations, because partly they just like the first English translations, they have been made by linguists for scientific purposes, in part, not so much for a wider public to access these teachings. And I just started wishing that the German-speaking people who do not understand English should also have access to such translations. And I was hoping that some experienced translator would just have the same inspiration and start doing it. But since after some years nothing happened, I thought, well, if I want to see something like this, the best way is to just start doing it and see how far I get. So, well, that's what I'm doing.
Wonderful project. And I think some of your translations are already available on SuttaCentral, if I'm not mistaken. And they're also on your own website, isn't it?
Yes, I'm around 20% through the canon, meanwhile. And I have decided to publish them early on, even if they are not perfect yet, and there are always edits happening, because I mean the canon is vast, and you start on one end, and as you go along, you gain deeper insights into these texts, and you start making edits. So that's totally natural. And what is now on SuttaCentral is probably not the final version of things, but well, I started publishing them early partly also because I am involved in the project of SuttaCentral Voice, which is a text-to-speech application in order to make these texts available to people with visual disabilities, so that they can listen to the texts. And as we wanted to make that application more international, we needed some translations different than English, so we needed another language. And that, yeah, well, So the translations can also be listened to in voice if people prefer listening over reading.
Very good. So I will leave a link to your website and to SuttaCentral in the description box. If people want to check it out, it is all available there. And I think we can start now with the poem that you have selected. And the poem that we are going to discuss today is a conversation between Mara and the bhikkhuni Sela. And I will once again share my screen so that people can read along. Okay, Anagarika Sabbamitta, whenever you are ready, please read out the poem.
Okay. There's no escape in the world. So what will seclusion do for you? Enjoy the delights of sensual pleasure. Don't regret it later. Sensual pleasures are like swords and stakes. The aggregates are their chopping block. What you call sensual delight is now no delight for me. Relishing is destroyed in every respect, and the mass of darkness is shattered. So know this, wicked one, you are beaten, Terminator.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And yeah, I think this is such a fascinating poem because it has been preserved in 4 different versions by several of the ancient Buddhist schools. So just now you mentioned different transmission lineages, and this poem has been preserved in different lineages, not just the Pali tradition. And that is extremely special because the Therīgāthā as a collection, as a scripture, have never been translated into Chinese or Tibetan or any other of the languages we still have. So most of those poems exist in only one version, the Pali version, but this poem has actually 4 versions in those 4 different schools. And for this reason, I think we have both decided before the video that we will make a part 2 of this video, so we can discuss the other 3 versions also, and people can compare and learn a little bit about different transmission lineages and different schools, different early schools of Buddhism. But in this video, we are just going to focus on the poem from the Therigatha that we have just read out. So yeah, Sabbamitta, why did you choose this poem?
Well, partly for those reasons that we just mentioned, because I find it so interesting that it has a parallel in the Samyutta Nikaya, which is another collection of the Pali Canon. And it also has these Chinese parallels that are still in existence today. Yes, that's one of the reasons. And another one is that this setting, the nun in discussion with Mara, she addresses him as a wicked one at the end of the poem, which is an epithet of Mara, and she behaves very self-confidently when he challenges her and basically shows him where his place is, and so that's something that's really fascinating. I mean, if that Mara, who is considered the worst of evil, is not able to intimidate this nun, so what on earth, or what in the entire world could still intimidate her? Nothing. So that's what fascinates me.
Yeah, it's a very beautiful poem. So maybe we can look at it in a little more detail. I think there are three verses in total. And the first verse is obviously Mara talking to her. And so he challenges her, so there's no escape, there's no point practicing the Dhamma. So why do you do this? Why do you practice in seclusion? Or if you want to take it in a little bit of a broader view, why do you renounce it all? Why did you become a nun? Why are you wearing those robes? So you should go back to lay life and enjoy life, and don't regret it when you're old, because you missed out on so much. So I think that is, even nowadays, 2,500 years later, still a very, very common prejudice that all monastics or all renunciate people face, but especially I think women face it to a larger extent than men. Because for men, there is a social paradigm as a renunciate, as a hermit, as a sage on a mountain. But for women, society expects us to be a lot more in a social role, taking care of the family, raising children. Even though, we think we live in the 21st century, but some prejudices and stereotypes are still there, and we still feel them. Once we actually step out of that role and try to do something unusual, then we can face those challenges. And I certainly have experienced that a lot of people ask me, why are you renouncing? Why did you become a nun? And it's completely incomprehensible to them that somebody would voluntarily do that. So I wanted to ask you if you have had any similar experiences that somebody is asking you.
Not so much as you, obviously. I was rather thinking that Mara is sometimes also, or can be considered as inner voices that we have in ourselves. So these are also questions that we ask ourselves sometimes. Why did I do this? Is that the right thing? Do I miss something else in life? That nun Sela obviously is beyond all these questions. So for her, it's totally clear, well, there is a point in renunciation, and there is something a goal to reach, and I have actually reached it. But as long as we are not yet there, such questions can always come up, and so Mara can also be an image or a simile for some tendencies within our own mind, which, yes, it's something that comes up sometimes, yes.
Yes, but as you already mentioned, she's very self-confident, so she's not intimidated by him, or she's not easily swayed into giving up the path and returning to the sense pleasures. And she uses some very beautiful, or very, not really beautiful, but very powerful similes to compare those sensual pleasures. So she says, like swords and stakes, and it's like, they're like you're being impaled on a sword. It's as painful, like a sensual pleasure is as painful as being impaled on a sword. Or it's like they hit you, like a knife chops you up on a chopping block. So it's a really, she makes it very clear, this is all dukkha. This isn't pleasurable at all. It's really, really, really painful once you see clearly what it's all about.
The problem with these sensual pleasures is that they just don't last. I mean, as we have talked in another video, this body is not something permanent, and what is pleasurable today will be different tomorrow, and things do not always feel nice, and you expect, I mean, the main thing of the sensual pleasure is that we put our expectations on them, and that will be disappointed sooner or later, and that then it's really, really painful. Yes, and she compares it with swords and chopping block. This sort of similes does occur elsewhere in the canon too. We have more suttas that compare sensual pleasures to a sword and a chopping block. So even to the degree that I think a murderer is running behind you with a sharp sword and wanting to chop off your head. This sort of simile of that similar sort is found a couple of times in the canon.
And I imagine that when you just come out of very deep meditation, deep jhanas or something, and your mind is extremely
Yes.
peaceful, and suddenly there's this onslaught of external conditions or impacts coming onto your mind through all the sense doors. That must feel quite unpleasant, I could imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's a matter of comparing these sensual pleasures. I mean, comparing a pleasant sensual experience to an unpleasant sensual experience. That's something nice. But comparing it to a very deep state of peace, well, yeah, totally true.
Yeah. And then in the last verse, she makes a very powerful declaration of awakening. Yes, as you have already mentioned, she's extremely self-confident. She calls him the wicked one. She calls him the terminator. In another poem that we are also discussing in this series, Finding Sanctuary, that I discuss with Ayya Soma, she introduces her own translation of exactly this verse, because this verse occurs in another poem also. And she translates terminator as death. So she just calls him death. So it's again a very strong metaphor that, living in samsara, being subject to the cycle of rebirth and death, as long as we're here, death is inevitable. And it's also implying that, Mara is the one who is trying to trap us in samsara, is the one who is, like death himself, like a killer, basically. So yes. I found it a very striking simile. Yes.
Yes. Terminator, that's the one who is making an end. So that's, yes, is another word perhaps for death. Yeah.
Yes, and just how she begins that verse: relishing is destroyed in every respect, and the mass of darkness is shattered. It's a very, powerful statement, and she's fully enlightened, and it's extremely beautiful, I think. So I think maybe this is a good point to end this video. If people have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section below. We are going to answer them all in our live stream. And the next episode of Finding Sanctuary will be uploaded tomorrow. And I'm Anagarika Sabbamitta. Thank you so much for joining us today. I think we had a really nice conversation, and it was really good to talk to you today.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu.